When it comes to competitive Pokemon Go, there is just no place like London. Ever since the 2022 World Championships, the most capable battlers from across the globe have made it a habit to descend upon the Excel Convention Center and shatter expectations. 2026 is no exception, setting yet another record for the largest tournament in history. 512 trainers attempted to conquer a custom meta that revolved around outlandish picks such as Seeking or Spiritomb. But when the dust settles, there can only be one. What the wolf is to VGC, the duck is to Pokemon Go. So let's get ready for a deep dive into the latest masterpiece of PvP prodigy, Patoman. You are listening to the Show 6 podcast, coming to you yet again with all the big stories around the Championship Series for our beloved Tap Tap game. So lock in, good luck, and have fun.
You see Pokémon grinning, you see Pokémon swiping, you see Pokémon winning for the second year in a row! Back-to-back EUIC champion, Pokémon claims the title in London. Nobody's ever done it like the Spanish prodigy.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is TzSteinar, and as always, I am joined by a second intro, apparently, and also Speediest Chief 2, apparently also the second Speediest Chief. How are you doing today, Speedy?
Everything was going so perfectly, ZZ, and apparently there's a setting on Zencaster that's called Infinite Loop, and it will play the soundbite over and over and over. But we're past that. ZZ, great intro. Great intro per usual, my friend. You always nail it. I was just going to give something very generic, but the duck to the wolf comparison, I mean, that's absolute poetry.
Like, honestly, I'm a little disappointed in Wolfie for not having pulled off the back-to-back EUIC championship, because that would have made it even better. I did have this comparison prepared a little ahead of time, but yeah, I guess like the sentiment is still the same, because both a duck and a wolf can be a goat. I am not your biology teacher, but I feel as if we are witnessing greatness in real time right now. 5-day threes in a row. What is Patoman doing?
Yeah, there must be something in the water in Spain, right? Absolutely unreal. And it was one of those storylines too, where you assume that after falling to that loser side bracket in round three, that it was likely over for our former EUIC champion. But he then turns around and wins as many rounds as a trainer that won two separate events, one combined. Right when we look at somebody like Inadequate, so Potsman is absolutely unreal. I cannot wait to get into his story and so much else as well. We're going to cover EUIC primarily in this episode. If you are a longtime Show 6 listener, you know that we have a backlog of tournaments to cover. And we're going to kind of shelve those Open Great League tournaments, and we're going to take a new approach to covering those in a follow-up episode that we will record soon. But for right now, in the immediate sense, we wanted to cover EUIC while it's still fresh in everyone's minds. And ZZ, it was great to run into you in London. We bumped into each other at China Palace. These internationals they just get bigger every single year. As you said, 500 plus players registered. It's tough to see everybody, but I'm glad we actually had a few moments and we actually got to take a picture again.
Yeah, you did post it on the socials. I'm very appreciative of that, because I am historically very bad at taking pictures or requesting pictures. So yeah, another encounter. I wonder when the next one is going to be. Likely NAIC. Maybe I can swing something before, but that is still very much up in the air. But yeah, it was a great time. And as always, it's one of the busiest weekends of the year for you as a caster, especially because I don't know how many hours do you work a day at least.
Well, I think on Friday and Saturday it tends to be a long day. So at the internationals we have to show up, and this is going to sound so bougie. We have to show up a bit early for makeup and hair. But that translates, instead of like an 8 a.m. or an 8:30 a.m. call time, we're essentially arriving at 7 or 7:20 a.m. So essentially we go from, I would call it 7 to 7, more or less on Friday and Saturday. And then Sunday is an easier day, of course, because you only have, in this case, losers, winners, and grand finals. But yeah, I'd say 12-hour days are pretty standard for Friday, Saturday. But we work in bursts, right? We got so many weekends off, and then we work a big tournament, and then we're off again.
Yeah, and I would imagine that it's a pretty rewarding job to work as well. Just like being able to be a big part of like the greatest tournament thus far in history. Again, like I think we had about 100 no-shows, but that would still leave us at more than 400 competitors. So,
Mhm.
despite what people might worry or say about the game, at least the attendance numbers are still going up for these big events. So that is something to
Yeah.
be optimistic about.
You could argue that we had maybe 100 or 150 people that just wanted the welcome kits, right? The competitor kits, and just signed up for that. But I don't know. It's hard to say. These events are getting so packed. And I think we had over 7,000 total competitors across all games, which is absolutely staggering. And the question then becomes, when do we move to a bigger venue that can house even more players, right? But to your point about the casting, I guess we could talk about that briefly because we will dive into the meta here shortly. But just while we're on this topic, Marto had his casting debut here at EUIC, and that was really fun. Essentially, we were in a position where Martine recruited Marto to join the team for this particular event. And Marto obviously is not a native English speaker, although his English is very good. And he had never commentated before. So Martine did some practice runs with him. Apparently, they were over voice calls in the weeks leading up. And Marto was very, very anxious, very nervous, right? So we get to rehearsal on Thursday, still very anxious, very nervous, kind of looking around, very jittery. But I was really pleased to hear that on Friday, after his first rotation with Martine, he said all the nervousness when the camera came on, all the nervousness just went away. And he was flowing, he was having a good time. He really enjoyed casting. And to your point about being tired after casting, I actually asked him on Sunday, I said, Marto, you got to tell me, is it more tiring to be a competitor or to be a caster? And he said, well, it's a different kind of tired, but I would say that casting is more tiring. And I was like,
Yeah,
you know, you know,
I
there it
can see
is.
that. You do not play for 12 hours straight. Like even like
Sure.
I don't know, maybe Partuman did with his run, but
Right.
um like normally you would have a lot more free time to get like lunch, take a break, depending on the schedule of the tournament. But
Hmm.
yeah, I didn't actually like watch all that much of the broadcast just because I was just there's so much to do during an event like that, so you don't actually like get to experience it the same way the people at home do, which like has a lot of benefits, but also the downside that I can't weigh in on the caster's performance as much. But what I did hear from Mato when I watched the broadcast was very much in line with the Mato energy, like a toned down version because it's obviously the official broadcast, but
Sure.
still like quick on his feet, like with a certain humor to his commentary, but also a lot of insight and knowledge. So
Yeah.
um, I'm glad that it worked out this time because I do believe that something like this was planned for NAIC already and then fell through
Mm.
just before the actual event because getting a work visa for the US is a little more difficult these
Very.
days. So I'm
Hmm.
glad that even with a little bit of a delay, we got to see Cast Amato, and I bet some of the competitors will also be very relieved because they had to deal with one less powerhouse in the bracket. There was still enough left for sure, but
Yeah, if you have both Marto and Martine kind of on the periphery, not in the bracket, I think that's a big relief.
yeah.
Martine has publicly said multiple times. He says he's happy whenever you don't show up to an event because that means his path is a lot more clear, right? So I think that's a huge compliment.
He's just trying to be nice.
I don't know about that, but yeah, I found that Marto is a huge fan of efficiency. Whenever players made extremely efficient plays, for example, not allowing farm downs, getting maximum energy generation, or throwing as many charge stacks as possible, he was like his eyes just lit up. Very very excited about that. Um, but if you'd like, we could dive into some meta trends. What really surprised me about this EUIC limited meta, and again, this was a limited meta, almost like a whitelist in a sense that we had typings allowed, typings banned. Certain Pokemon were exceptions; they were excluded from the bans, and then you also had certain Pokemon that were explicitly banned, even though they matched the typing requirements. So this is a little bit complicated. And when I previewed this, when I talked about this on the previous show, our host Skarzik, he said, "Man, I need a spreadsheet to track all the different bands and like figure out what's actually viable here." But essentially, you had a meta that was based around bugs, dragons, a lot of normal type Pokemon, and then ghost and dark types as well. So What really struck me about this meta, ZZ, for all the people that watched it, is that the practice tournaments that I participated in, spectated, the teams that I was looking at, they were wildly different than the teams that actually performed well. So I'm curious if you have any insights on this as a competitor. Did you see these trends coming before they were apparent?
So I will want to contrast this with the LAIC meta, right? Because
Mm,
this is the second instance of us having a custom meta to figure out for one of these big events. So now we can actually contrast and compare these two. Where the LAIC meta had 17 different species in Top Cut, being a top 32 Top Cut. The EUIC meta, still more limited than an open meta, but 23 different species. So that's like a 35% increase. Um, and yeah, I feel as if you could feel that in practice as well, where the optimal strategy felt a lot less obvious. Like the meta was a lot less solved than the LAIC meta was. With LAIC, you had 100% Oranguru usage in day
mm,
two, and you had very little movement from one strategy to another during practice. Essentially, not really much happening other than people realizing that Medicham was one of the best Pokemon in the meta, and
yeah.
other than that, it was essentially just like stale 8 to 9 Pokemon just in various configurations with a couple of inefficient spice picks here and there. And EUIC was different because I think it was like advertised as the big Spidops meta. Everybody was expecting another Oranguru experience just with Spidops as the top dog of the meta. Um, but this meta had a lot more variety in strategy, like with the airdrops of Milotic, Seeking, Frostlass, and just with great variety in what the various Pokemon that were allowed and whitelisted could do. Um, and so I feel as if from week to week, the meta shifted and shifted and shifted. Very early on, people were mostly going by PvPoke,
Mm,
playing Spidops as their main bug type, experimenting with the stuff that was highly ranked. And then eventually people figured out, okay, there's going to be one bug on every team. Everything else is kind of weak to Tyranitar. People were experimenting with that as the spice pick. Then people were countering that by bringing Quick Attack for it. And then after that development, I feel as if the meta started to settle a little more. Because the
yeah.
reaction to Quick Attack for it was Spiritomb. And Spiritomb ended up being one of those gravity wells that the meta revolved around, one of those Pokemon that had staying power. So going into EUIC, I had a little bit of a split preparation because I work as a sports journalist and we're recording this on Sunday, the last day of the Winter Olympics. In the lead up to EUIC, I had 7 straight days of work where I couldn't really practice as much. So essentially, I was very, very, very well prepared for the meta as it shaped up a week before the tournament. But so much has happened since. The overall formula that I was pretty much set on and that turned out to be fairly consistent even at the actual event was that 4 Pokemon were essentially a given. A bug
Mm,
type, in my opinion, preferably a shadow bug type with the extra bug bite pressure. A rollout user. This could be Licky Licky, which ended up being more popular, but it could also be Dunsparce, which ended up being more effective because you had an
correct.
easier way of hitting Spiritomb, set Gravity Well, without having to successfully bait the Pokemon, because Drillrun is just much cheaper than Earthquake. And then Spiritomb obviously being a big player, and also the Shadow Drapion, which is just such a flexible pick, resisting
Yeah.
the sucker punches and having a lot of neutral play into a lot of the meta. So Bug, Rollout, Spiritomb, Drapion was something that you saw on essentially every successful team. And then there's 2 flex picks. 2 picks that you can choose from the whitelisted list. You can double up on rollout users, such as Colin's 6 team that did finish second. You can bring in a dragon like Kingdra, like Zweilous, like Dragalge. You can run Frostlass because that has so much sweeping potential. You can bring Grimmsnarl, which is a little obvious, but it's probably going to be fine, right? At least you double resist Dragon Breath. Or you could bring like the waters that were whitelisted in Milotic and Seeking, which also ended up
Yeah.
a very popular strategy, taking first, taking third, and also taking up two further top 8 places on the teams of Nighttime Flasher and Sustenance Eater. So yeah, essentially you had those four locked in mons, then you had two flex picks, and I was prepared for the wrong flex picks because um originally a lot of Kingdra was being played, and that had a last second adjustment on many teams for where Milotic as the dragon type damage dealer that doesn't take super effective from dragon type damage and
Hmm.
also functions as a neutral pivot. So that was essentially a counter reaction to Kingdra. And then essentially like the last slot, I guess like the Seeking helps with just like the flexibility of play that it allows you. Because it's a debuffer, it has a hard hitting move, and crucially, it is a pack user, meaning it has flying type damage in a meta where flying types are banned, and you are able to pressure the bug types that otherwise can just run through your team pretty well. So that was essentially like what the meta ended up being, and my whole like, oh, I bring a Furret, oh, I at least jam it to Sucker Punch, so I have some play into Spiritomb. That was
Uh-huh.
still very much last week, so um, I was a little behind. Other people adapted a lot better. But overall, I really enjoyed the process of figuring out this meta because it was much more dynamic, much more ever evolving than what we saw during LAIC.
Correct. I think you absolutely nailed it. I had a list of questions, right, that I DM'd ZZ before the recording, and you essentially answered in one shot. You answered, I think, 75% of them, right? Such a fascinating look. So the first question was, where did Furret go? I think the rise of Spiritomb is a great answer to that question because you do have the ghost typing, and I day two during the broadcast, it finally clicked for me that if you have Spiritomb and you have a Body Slam user or a Wrap user like Milotic, if you're in that matchup and your opponent catches a double resisted normal type attack on your Spiritomb, it's like absolutely devastating. And it does put you behind in terms of the energy gain and how the matchup is going. So that makes a lot of sense. Next question I had was, why do some spice picks like Tyranitar not work, but others like Hisui and Samurott do? We haven't really dived into that yet. I think that Tauntaun was the only trainer in Top Cut to finish with Tyranitar. We did get to cast one of his matchups on stream. He went for the regular instead of the Shadow, which I thought was a little bit interesting too. But I do want to come back to the team composition layout that you presented. So I absolutely agree with you. I'm going to try to throw this graphic up on screen when we do get the YouTube version up. Fingers crossed. But we have the Bug Bite user, which is Shadow Beedrill, Spidops, or Shadow Venomoth. But with some exceptions, we had one Golisopod on Galactica Bolton's team, and then we had a couple of Ariados, LNDS Areo and Zardy were playing. Second slot, Licky Licky or Dunsparce. Slot three, I actually have here a flex pick. So this could be Sea King. It could be your second normal type. If you already pick Licky Licky, it could be Dunsparce, for example. It could also be Grimmsnarl, or in the case of Stone Collection, it could be the Dunsparce, which is a really, really nice choice. Slot four, I have Primary Dark. So Primary Dark, I classify as Spiritomb, or in the case of C. Leonardo, it's his Hisui and Samurott, but mostly it's going to be Spiritomb. Slot five. This was a huge surprise, I think, as well, because you mentioned Shadow Drapion being on so many teams. It was everywhere, especially on top performing teams, and we saw this really in the day one to day two usage stats. Shadow Drapion just rocketed up. I think it was either number one or number two most common pick, overtaking Licky Licky, which is insane. And then the sixth slot, I have Dragon or Pseudo Dragon. It seems like every single team, with a couple of exceptions, had either Milotic, Kingdra, or Zweilous. And then you have maybe Shadow Milotic on Zardy's team, or you have Kaifia's Shadow Frost Eyes, which is definitely a different look. But that seemed like the six slots. And going into this, my flex used to be the second normal primarily, but then it kind of pivoted towards Sea King or Grimmsnarl or something like that. So um, yeah, I think it's really cool that we both kind of arrived at the same talking point here. And I know that I've been going on for a little while here. But I have one assumption. I have one assumption here. Spidops was overtaken by Shadow Beedrill just because it was too slow. It's a solid setup Pokemon. I don't know if any trainer played it better than Steinar played it, or TZ Gabs. I don't know if any trainer played it better than he played it, but it felt like Shadow Beedrill was overrepresented, especially in top eight, and that was for good reason. So we can kind of take this any way you want. I don't know if you want to talk about Shadow Beedrill, if you want to talk about Spice Picks, or if you want to talk about why water is the best offensive type and defensive type in Pokemon Go, and that will never change.
I feel like that would be an all-timer. I think like some interesting numbers are also how the top 64 from EUIC differs from the 64 entrants that participated in the Zygarden priced practice tournament that was held a week before. So we have actually the exact same sample size of teams. And I feel as if like the level is also relatively similar because if you play a Zygarden tournament, you are very much like ingrained in the grassroots scene and probably a little bit of a tryhard at least. So I think the most notable changes just over the last week were a plus 39% increase in Shadow Beedrill. This
Mhm.
is like just like adding up the percentages. It's like not that percentage of what it was previously. So it went from 23.4% percent usage to 62.5% usage. Milotic plus 28.1, Dunsparce plus 26.5. So these are essentially okay. We have Spiritomb at 21.9 as well. So those four were really the big winners. B replacing Spidops because, as you mentioned, it's much faster in that some of its pace doesn't even really come from reaching its charge attacks, but just doing immediate damage with the bug bites.
Mhm.
Milotic being the anti-Kingdra adjustment, because Kingdra, on the other hand, went down a substantial amount over the same amount of time. And then Spiritomb Rising, people realizing, okay, this is just like the I can throw it into everything that isn't a dedicated dark type, even Drapion is fine for it kind of Pokemon. And Dunsparce as either the primary rollout user on many people's teams or a secondary rollout user just because it's so much more fine into Spiritomb than Licky Licky is. And yeah, that's all just like major shifts that came 1 week ahead of the tournament. And yeah, I guess like you really had to be on top of your meta reads there. And yeah, we
Yeah.
can we can jump into the bracket and see who of our trainers actually figured it out the best.
So just before we jump into the bracket, I did have one additional question for you that you didn't one shot in your first response. So I wanted to have a chance here to ask you. And this is a great segue too, because on the Zygarden graphic, we do see Khaleesi Fitzy in seventh place with Dragalge. And going into this event, the casters are always the casters are always asked for our top picks. And for best in class dragon, we actually picked Dragalge, which was, in hindsight, a grievous error, and we should have leaned more towards Kingdra or even towards Milotic. Where did Dragalge go? Because it felt like that Pokemon was so good in Go Battle League and the EUIC limited meta there. It was pretty popular in practice, but then when we actually get to the tournament day, it's like nowhere to be seen. I don't think anyone was playing it.
I think one problem that Dragalge had was its matchup into other dragons. So if you reserve your dragon slot for that Pokemon, you want it to have solid play into its counterparts. But you cannot Aqua Tail a Kingdra, you cannot Aqua Tail a Milotic, and you don't really want to
Mm,
Aqua Tail as Wireless either. So while there is utility in resisting bug type damage and in having a pretty solid matchup into Drapion, which to be fair, the other dragons can also replicate or even improve upon in the case of Xylis. I think there's just too much, just like too little that Aqua Tail damage, non-step Aqua Tail at that offers from a Dragalge, as well as the poison typing defensively being both a blessing and a curse, because on the other dragons, you will easily be able to take a drill run from a Dunsparce or even an earthquake from a Licky Licky, whereas for a Dragalge, that is either going to put it very low or even straight up take it out.
I agree. Yeah, I think that your point about Kingdra rising in popularity, Milotic also rising in popularity, and then Dragalge's just inability to hit back against it. I think that really stood out. When you look at Dragon type Pokemon, you have obviously the Dragalge with Aqua Tail and Outrage. You had the Kingdra with Swift and Outrage. I didn't say it on the broadcast, but I kept wanting to call Kingdra Coin Flip Kingdra because either you connect with the Outrage and you hit a home run and everything's going great, or somebody calls your swift bait and you're screwed, right? So when you put it in that context and you say, well, if somebody calls my outrage on Dragalge, then I'm just forced to throw an Aqua Tail into a Kingdra, which is double resisted, and that's just awful, or into Milotic, which is single resisted, and that sucks too. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that the potential upside was just not there for something like Dragalge. So that's an important lesson, and hopefully next time when we make our caster predictions for an IC, we don't have that kind of misplay, and hopefully nobody noticed that, but I'm sure somebody did. But yeah, if you like, we can get into bracket now that we've kind of given you an overview of the meta for EUIC. What an insane bracket, even without Marteau, even without inadequates, so many talented trainers. I'm not sure if you just want to address the elephant in the room here before we get into the player storylines. It might be good to kind of get it out of the way.
Yeah, I think what you are referring to is that in fourth place, taking home a trophy back to Brazil, we have the trainer formerly known as LNDS TzSteinar, now competing under a new name and on a new account. And
Mhm.
this has happened because Steiner was temporarily banned from the Play Pokemon Championship Series, and his previous account is essentially forever locked. If you're friends with his previous account, it will still show up as level 50 because that account was permanently banned just before we had the level 80 update. And there are there's conflicting information, conflicting details on how this actually happened. Um, the story that has been circulating online has been one of a supposedly spoofed Bastiodon being used at the Pittsburgh regionals that Steiner ended up winning against me, of all people. And upon hearing that, I was obviously like a little flustered, like, oh no, this is my fourth grand finals loss in a row, and it was against a cheated Pokemon? That feels really bad. But I have moved past that and I have reached out to Steiner and asked him for his account on the situation. Um, and again, I do not have any way to verify this.
Mhm.
But what he essentially told me is that none of his Pokemon that were used at either Pittsburgh or Belo Horizonte, which is a Brazilian regional he competed in afterwards, were actually obtained through illegitimate means. But there had still been an incident at the Belo Horizonte event that eventually led to his account termination and the temporary ban in Play Pokemon. He was later granted the right to open up a fresh Pokemon Go account, which he used to compete at EUIC, and which also probably explains why he didn't have a Shadow Bugbiter available, because it's a new account and you cannot trade Shadow Pokemon.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I am inclined to believe Steiner's version of events thus far because not only does it feel like Occam's razor would tell you that it's very unlikely that somebody just spoofs their tournament team one day ahead of the event, which is supposedly
Yeah.
um,
Another
how that
rumor.
was. Yeah, like it was like the rumor how it actually like came up that that Bastion was spoofed. Apparently, it had the blue background of a newly caught Pokemon. It's like all like very urban legend type of deal.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, supposedly that was a hoax. I again can neither confirm nor deny what actually happened, but it didn't really make sense to me that somebody would do that. But still, there had been an incident at the Belo Horizonte event that was still uh, warranting a punishment, and Steiner didn't
Mhm.
deny that there was wrongdoing on his terms. But apparently, it didn't really um, impact the integrity of his previous tournament runs. Um, I can choose to be mad about the Pittsburgh Grand Finals based on rumors, or I can choose to trust his account and accept that. I did have the feeling as if he was being honest with me, so I
Mhm.
do not hold any grudges. And even though I feel as if this is a very light sentence if there was serious cheating involved, I am not generally against second chances, and especially for somebody who I believe has a lot of personal emotional stakes just with the friends that he's made. and just like what Pokemon just gives to somebody who is so entrenched in the competitive scene. I
Mhm.
hope he can enjoy that again without being harassed about the previous incident, which I do believe has happened.
Yes.
So yeah, again, there's a lot of ambiguities, a lot of things that we don't know. But if anything, I feel as if EUIC did show us that nobody should spoof for PvP Pokemon because you can start an account in like late 2025 and take home a trophy in early 2026. I feel like that should be the main takeaway,
Right. Driver, not car. I guess some people could argue.
essentially.
Pokemon Go as a community has a very strong history when it comes to spoofing, cheating, uh, paying accounts on eBay to get you specific Pokemon or whatever it might be. A lot of the OGs remember the 2020 Orlando Mega Tournament and how the EX Raid Pass I don't want to call it an exploit, but kind of like the consequence of the EX Raid Pass in revealing people that were spoofers are currently under kind of a shadow ban from Niantic. That whole thing was insane. For you guys that weren't there, it was basically a situation where it was discovered that if you sent someone an EX Rate Pass invite and it bounced back to you, that meant that that person was a shadow banned by Niantic for account violations. So essentially, you had a situation where we had over 200 or almost 300 players gathered together, and the news came out. So everybody was just like sending the invites to everyone on their friends list, just spamming it to everyone, just trying to check and see who was legit, who was cheating, who was lying, and essentially it culminated in relationships ending, friendships that had been going on for years imploded overnight. You had people crying and begging and making appeals to rooms full of their friends, trying to explain themselves. The culture of shame is like very very strong in Pokemon Go, and especially was strong back in the grassroots days. So I understand this very volatile reaction. I didn't read the chat during the tournament, but apparently the chat was just in flames, trying to, roast Steinar, make allegations, be really rude to him, say mean things to hurt his feelings, whatever it might be. But from a caster perspective, we have to maintain a professional air about it, and we have to address things, as eloquently as possible. So, from a casting perspective, I can only say the basic things. I could say he's qualified for Worlds. He's one of Brazil's best, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously, can't go into reasonings on the broadcast. So, if anybody was frustrated with the commentators for not saying more about the situation, frankly, it's out of our hands. There's a rule system in place. There's the TPCI rule system, and there's the Niantic rule system. Obviously, account spoofing, etc. We've known about Niantic's three-strike policy for years, a decade rather. We've known about that. And then you have the TPCI rules, which are new to us, and a lot of players don't really look into that because a lot of us don't have any reason to fear punishment because we don't actually engage in any exploits. But I will say that based on the rule systems that are in place, the punishments were handed down to Steinar, and the appeals were made on his behalf. And like ZZ has said, he's talked with him privately. I've also talked with Steinar privately. He seems very apologetic. He seems very sincere in what happened, and I think only when you come to the point where you risk losing your community, losing your friends, losing something that you've really invested so much of your time and energy in, do you actually reflect back and say, man, maybe I shouldn't be an idiot and exploit. Maybe I shouldn't be stupid and try to find shortcuts. Maybe I should actually uh, take a more reasonable approach. So um, I don't know if Steinar will stay on the straight and narrow. I don't know if he'll have another violation in the future. I don't know what the future holds, but um, honestly, people are gonna have their opinions no matter what, but I will tell everyone that it's not like he somehow like cheated the system and tricked Scopely into making a new account and just found a way out and just continues to be, continues to deceive people. That's definitely not the case. He's gone through all the different hoops and rule sets that he needs to in order to compete. So yeah, I mean, as ironically as you put it, it does kind of show that if somebody is good enough, they can pick up an account, start a new account, whatever it might be, and they can turn around and actually place really well with it. And if you have a community like he does, where people will trade you Grimmsnarls and trade you Spite Ops, even though you missed the event, then I guess you can make it work. But yeah, that was a whole controversy, and of course, internally, privately, I was getting a lot of messages, and a lot of people that I love and respect were just talking certain ways about Steinar. So, yeah, there's definitely some feelings, some strong feelings on both sides of it. But I don't know if you talked to Steiner outside of the event, but I bumped into him in the venue hall with all the Brazilians, and he seemed to be in good spirits, and he told me he was excited to go back and listen to the commentary. So you know, best wishes for Steiner.
Yeah, I didn't actually talk to him in person, but so I do obviously have emotions of my own, and I used to be a lot more negative about the situation. But
Yeah.
then I was essentially I pointed towards that I really only know the rumors myself and hadn't actually reached out to him. So I did
Hmm.
just that, and yeah, he did appear genuine to me. And at the end of the day, what happened happened. And now the question is, how do we move on from that? How is he moving on from that? Um, Likely learning a lesson and treating the game a different way than before. And how are we as a community moving on from that? Like we certainly shouldn't excuse cheating,
Hmm.
but we probably also should question whether we know all the details of a situation before we cast judgment on anybody.
Yeah. We were talking about this before we turned the cameras on. I mean, we've heard so many different stories. It oscillates between being something like very reasonable and an honest mistake to, like you said, maybe a blue background surrounding a Pokemon that's like brand new that apparently is in a new location that he battled with. Like the rumors are crazy, and it is a game of telephone. Like, it's going back and forth and getting more and more outlandish every time the story is told. So I I don't know, just like with all things with the internet, I wouldn't believe everything that you see. And Steinar, if you've ever encountered him, is definitely a shy and private person. So I don't expect any kind of big public grandiose statement. He's not going to record a video and post online, explain everything. It's just kind of is what it is. So people can love him, people can hate him, but I don't know. That's the thing, right? That's the thing. You can have a personal opinion, but if you really want to change the system, you have to actually appeal to TPCI, appeal to Scopely or whatever it might be, and change the structure around it. And that's just the way it is. So I felt like it was important for us to get that out of the way. Obviously, I can't talk about that on the official broadcast, and this is a good outlet for us to talk about it. And it's uniquely personal to you and your story in Pittsburgh, so that's another reason to touch on it. But now that we've kind of got that out of the room, I don't know if people will be happy with that explanation or if they'll think that we're being too soft. But whatever, I don't care. That's the truth. It's time to talk about some other player storylines. All right, let's be real. A lot of
Yeah.
players competed and a lot of good talented ones were in the tournament. So I don't know who you want to talk about first. I've got one trainer on my mind. What do you say?
I think that you did mention that you want to talk about our world champion Beelzebub. I do feel as if the person that I had on my list is actually the one tying with him for seventh place in Sustenance Eater, which is like kind of interesting because Sustenance Eater feels like the trainer newest to the scene in Top Cut, whereas Beelzebub, obviously as the world champion, is just about the highest profile player in the Top Cut. Um, but yeah, like making a habit of attending TPCI sanctioned events as of this season. And yeah, I did talk to Beelzebub briefly at one of the socials, and he was like, "Yeah, like I got my worlds payout, I got a lot of prize money, and I'm putting that back into traveling and competing because that gives me the opportunity to see the community." And
Hmm.
I'm very happy for him that he did finish in seventh and made some of the travel money back.
I don't know Beelzebub intimately, right? But based on my limited interactions with him, he's just a nice kid. He's just very nice, and I feel like he's a great representation of
I think
us.
that he's like in his 20s, so he's like not even like I know he would pass as like a teenager still, but I don't even think he's a
Yeah.
kid. But he's very nice. He's like a very friendly and genuine person.
I feel like, and this is such a boomer take. I feel like I feel like as I get older, anyone that's like 10 years younger
Yeah,
than
yeah,
me
yeah.
I refer to
I'm
them as a
out here
kid.
calling the world champion a kid. Yep, yep. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, heck, and honestly, I kind of look at it, when I say it, I don't mean it, in a degrading sense. I mean it as, like,
I know you don't.
they still are young, they still have their entire future ahead of them, and
Yeah.
when I think of myself when I was 20, I think, "Man, I was just a kid." Like that, the very famous quote, I think it's from The Sopranos, right? There's, like, a character that passes away, and they say, "Oh, yeah, he was 85," and the quote is, "Oh, he was just a kid." It's like,
Well,
one of those
his
situations.
name is Beelzeboy. Like he should maybe rename to Beelzeman if he doesn't want to be called a kid on the podcast.
Exactly, or Beelzebub, right? Something like that. But what a run for a world champion, and honestly, ZZ, I love doing the show with you because the second trainer I wanted to talk about was Sustenance Eater, so
Oh,
you're
that's
right on
cool.
the money with that. So let's go ahead and jump, to Beelzebub real quick. I think it's really cool because Dancing Raw really set a precedent when he won Worlds in 2022 and then just kind of stopped competing. Just went completely into staffing and judging, which is excellent, and I'm glad he's doing that. But whenever you see a world champ succeed, you really the question just becomes, what do they do next? And we haven't seen Yakai compete as often. Axon, of course, is competing quite a bit, and to see Beelzeboy doing so well at a UIC was really cool. Just recapping his run really briefly, he was able to win 3 rounds against some pretty solid trainers. But then in the semifinals for Group F, he was defeated by Hikame. He went to the loser side bracket and took on JB Cal, 9 Alfie, and Ait 131, and won all 3 of those matches to make it to day number 2. Now, when he got to day number 2, this is a crazy run, right? We talk about insane runs. This is a very, very good run. He beat August Isley, he beat LNDS Kanan, he beat Cookshack, and he beat C. Leonardo in his Hisui and Samurott, but he was finally felled by Nighttime Clasher. So it took the LAIC champion to bring down our world champion, which I think speaks volumes. And I didn't get a chance to talk with him in London, but what a good performance. And I think if anybody's questioning if the world champion still got it, that's your answer.
Yeah, I don't think many people were questioning Beelzeboy, but he is actually the person with the second most match wins behind Partoman, tied with Stone Collection. And I believe with the, let me check real quick. Yeah, with the second most game wins, so matches being entire sets, games being individual games of the entire tournament. So just like in isolation, also just like a very, very strong performance. Like seventh, like it's like kind of unassuming. Like top eight is always like the threshold for like, okay, this was like really, really great, but still it's not a trophy, it's not an A3, but it's still like one hell of a run, really, which is fitting because Beel's a boy. But
Exactly.
I also really appreciate that he did it with a team that was very unusual because it was one of the few teams that didn't have a Spiritomb on it, instead opting
Mm,
for the Grimmsnarl that I personally despise, but can respect
yeah,
as a bit of a spicier pick.
I
It
don't like
just
it either.
feels so RPS in this meta, but
Yes.
a Pokemon that I really enjoy, next to the Zweilous, which obviously is a favorite of mine, is also the Frostlass, which has been a little bit of a GBL hero for me in the Championship Meta Cup.
Hmm.
I didn't feel as if it was super well positioned for the actual thing, just because everybody can freely run Spiritomb plus a Rollouter into every match. But it is one of the better ways of dealing with a Beedrill on the opponent's side of the team, because you outpace and resist. So yeah, that was certainly a fun team, and he piloted it as a world champion would.
Yeah, I think the Frost Ice is a good answer, especially when you have 2 dark types on your team, being the Zweilous and the Grimmsnarl. But yeah, shout out to Beelzeboy. Great run by him. I'm really excited to talk about Sustenance Eater because I actually spoke about this on the EUIC pre-show. Nighttime Clasher was my trainer to highlight, but I kind of like snuck one in there and I said I almost put his brother in this spot instead, but it felt wrong to knock out the LAIC champion in lieu of his brother. But my goodness, Sustenance Eater, what a trajectory. This is like a hockey stick straight up into success. And he was so good last weekend.
Yeah, so he's been tying his best performance ever with his seventh place. But this is EUIC. His previous best performance was the Melbourne Regional, which is nothing to scoff at. but it is not EUIC.
Yeah.
So to just go in there and essentially like tie with the world champion in the largest tournament ever, as somebody who was introduced as like, oh, the little brother of, I feel as if he's like working his way out of just that spot and really becoming a big threat in his own right. And I
Mhm.
believe in one of his very early tournaments, he had a crazy day one run where he defeated Rise, like multiple top NA trainers. So even when he first appeared on the map, it was already like, okay, this kid, I will say kid because he's younger than Eric, um, has potential. Um, but now this potential is being actualized and on such a stage
Yeah.
as well. So like I would not be surprised if we're talking about the first top four in like a regular sized regional sooner rather than later.
Exactly. And I think his brother, Nighttime Clasher, he posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, and he said regional winner soon for Sustenance Eater. And I definitely see that happening. Recap his run just really briefly. He had, I think, a no show round one. He won rounds two, three, and four, all straight 2-0s, didn't drop a single game. Then he took on Zardy in the Group J finals, was able to win that 2-1. Went on to day number two. He disposed of Cookshack 2-0. He was defeated by TzSteinar 2-0. But in that loser side bracket, he brought down Stone Collection, which I think Stone's playing his best PvP of his whole career. So that's a massive win. And then it took our eventual champion, Patoman, to actually knock him out of the bracket decisively. So losing to Steinar and Pato, I mean, you can't say anything negative about that.
Yeah, like speaking of Stone, this is a hot take. I don't know how well it will age, and I don't know how many tournaments he'll be playing. I know he'll be playing Seattle,
Oh.
but I think it's more likely that his name and face will end up on one of these cards that play Pokemon posts where they have all the regional champions by the end of the season. I think him becoming one of those faces is going to be more likely than that not happening because he's kind of overdue a second victory after his very early last chance qualifier victory with the Samurott all the way back in
Mm.
2022. But
He
yeah,
was third place in Toronto. So
yeah. Like he's been having a very consistently strong season.
yeah.
Yeah, eventually there's going to be another grand finals, and eventually some of his outlandish picks, like the Dunsparce this time around, are going to make it all the way through.
Yeah.
But yeah, like like the sustenance eater trajectory is so interesting to me because even with a nighttime clasher, you were like thinking about, oh, this is like the example to point to when I talk about how quickly somebody can rise from essentially like new to the game to a consistent presence in top cuts and actual tournament threat. And
Mhm.
now we have the same thing with the younger brother. And like sometimes there's like narratives about, oh, like who's the more talented of the two brothers, like actual rivalries between the two. I feel like in
Yeah.
regular sports, that's even more common than in the little PvP scene that we got. But honestly,
Yeah.
I know it from my own experience. Like I am a little older than Jonkus, but the thing that first inspired me to get good at the game was that he got rank one at the GBL leaderboards, and I wanted
Ooh.
to prove myself that I can do that too. And it took a couple years, but I did manage to establish myself. And I feel as
Nice.
if such a brotherly rivalry can actually go a long way in really just igniting that flame and helping somebody on their trajectory because it's a lot more fun than just doing it in a vacuum.
We need to get a sibling showdown. I want everybody to drop us a comment here. Who do you think would win? A Z's Wireless Jonkus duo versus a Nighttime Clasher Sustenance Eater duo?
It's
That would
like
be
it's like the dark
insane.
horse pairing of Kelio and Colin as well. And
Yeah.
Pato's little brother has started competing recently, so
Let let's throw in Lyle Jeffs and Blob NA. We can have those two,
true.
right? Right. We got some brotherly rivalries brewing here. But
It's
no, I
a lot of
sorry,
talented
say again.
siblings in the community. But yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, there really are. I think it's interesting, and I first got a whiff of this, if I may pause, a whiff of this when Nighttime Clasher said that basically his brother was building teams, and that he would just take a team that his brother built and then he would actually play it and have a lot of success. I was like, huh. So maybe Sustenance Eater is actually cooking up at a high level. So I'm not sure what his next event will be, but I fully anticipate he will do well. Just like you shouted out to Stone Collection, I think Sustenance Eater is due very soon for a regional win. If I can shout out one more trainer just briefly, this isn't on our script. I'm going a little off script here, but wasn't it incredible to see Palasha do as well as she did? I know that if you keep up with Paula on socials, she hasn't had a very good time as of late. A lot of real life things have been hitting pretty hard. And I think that happens to all of us at some point. I think that Zardy went through some similar things a year or two ago, and he's publicly shared that. But to see Paula do so well, make it to day number two, actually defeating Nighttime Clasher, being dropped to the loser side bracket by Hikame, and then being beaten in a close game three by Pato Man. Paula did so well, and I think she was also very proud to see another Spanish prodigy actually win it all. So if you're gonna beat Paula, at least carry the torch forward, right?
Yeah, like Spanish PvP was so well represented by Pato and Paula once again, and let me check the top card actually because I do believe there was like even more Spanish representation. Oh yes, Chris LB taking me out of all people. I did lose my first top 32 round against Chris, and yeah, like just didn't really have
Mm.
like the best answers to his B drill. I tried my best, and Marcos Shiny also making the top 32. So consistently one of the most high performing PvP regions, and yeah, happy for Paula that the PvP scene could be a little bit of a distraction, if nothing else, after some tough personal news shared on the socials recently.
Yeah, exactly. So many good storylines here in our bracket. I know that we can't mention everybody, but I'll just kind of give a real quick roundup. See Leonardo with the Hisuian Samurott. What a fun pick. What a fun play. I did not expect that Pokemon to do anything. I thought it was another GBL hero, kind of like Shadow T-Tar, but he made it look like it was an S tier pick. We had as well Blissfully. I was really impressed by Blissfully's gameplay. Thought he's a very, very talented. And there was one more I wanted to call out. I think it was so August Isley didn't have the best day two. He ran into Beelzeboy in round one and was knocked out of the loser side bracket. But on the group stage, I thought August Isley was actually very solid as well. So it feels like a lot of European trainers are improving, and can't wait to see what they do next.
August Isley, not the most European of trainers, as a I think New York resident making his way over.
Ah, my
Um,
mistake.
but he has been on a strong run of form. Won a local just yesterday. I do have insight in that because a teammate of mine came third in that. Shout outs to Cheese Girl Ben at this point in the broadcast. But yeah, blissfully, I have one comment on that. This guy
Yeah.
ran Blissey in practice a lot. I'm a little disappointed that he didn't bring it to the actual event, but I'm also kind of glad because, like, who really wants to see a Blissey make day two? Like, we don't have time for that.
And if you look at the team, it was weird at EUIC too. He had Kingdra, Licky Licky, and Spidops, but then the familiarity ends there. He follows that up with Miltank with Gyro Ball, which you talked about targeting a meta that's a week old. This is targeting like the Grimmsnarl heavy meta from 2 or 3 weeks ago. And then you had Sableye, which I mean was so far off the radar, it might as well have just not been there at all for me. And then Umbreon. So what a bizarre team of six.
Yeah, if it works, it works. I honestly kind of see the Umbreon angle because like it's a sucker punch resist, it neutrally beats the rollout users, but it just really
Mhm.
doesn't want to be up against a bug biter. So it's like
Yeah.
hit and miss, but it's bulky, so can't
Yeah,
really go
yeah.
wrong with it. Yeah,
Oh,
like overall, just really delighted with the team building because it's a lot more creative and entertaining, in my opinion, than what we saw during LAIC.
and I was so glad. I told Amanda this probably 3 or 4 times over the weekend. I was so glad that we got to commentate this one because LAIC was great. It was really fun. It was a good experiment into limited metas, but this one felt much more alive, much more organic, and there's a lot more skill expression. One more curveball I want to toss your way, ZZ. See Leonardo. Not only did he have the Hisuian Samurott, but he was also carrying the Shadow Venomoth torch forward, and he finished ninth place overall. I just want to know if
Yes.
you're proud of that performance.
Big supporter of the Venomoth gaming. I was on Venomoth for like weeks, and I still believe that it is very good. It is a little slower than Beedrill, but it doesn't have to choose between doing damage and altering the stats in a battle, because the Fang kind of combines the best of both worlds between the Felstinger and the Excisor. So I really I like not having to rely on 50-50 calls. So is my opponent going to
Mm.
shield, is he not? Um so I did like that about the Venomoth, and I also always enjoy when I position myself in a way where my opponent's shields are down. I have like one shield left, and I can just farm up all the way to a Bug Buzz and take an opponent out. I don't even know whether C. Leonardo was on Bug Buzz or on Silverwind, but I was Bug Buzzing all over the place. And yeah, I have so one of the reasons why I wasn't on Beedrill but on Venomoth was not only because I want to be very special always, but also because
Yes.
my Beedrills are all kind of bad, whereas my Venomoths
Mm.
are rank 25, rank 24, and rank 9. I have three top rank 25 Shadow Venomoths for the Great League. I also have a Shadow Shiny, which is
Oh.
unfortunately a bad rank, but
Ah. Well.
yeah, very much blessed by them all.
Yeah, that's one of those things where the invisible hand of fate is just kind of steering you one direction, right? So,
Exactly. It
gotta
was
play
meant to be.
Venomoth. But, there's so many trainers to talk about. I feel like we should zero in a little bit more. If you're ready, we can talk about some grand finals action and our top 3 finalists.
Yeah, let's do that. I will briefly scroll down to my notes because I do believe that I have notes on the losers finals and the grand finals, not the winners finals, but
Mhm.
oh yeah, the losers finals were between Patu, who came all the way from winners round three, dropping and then just going through the entire field, and Hikami, who made it to the winners finals undefeated, but then had to suffer a I think 0-3 defeat versus Colin, who was called the
Mhm.
final boss for a reason.
Yeah.
And I think this was our first little look at what Pato was up to in day three, which was nice, informing our perspective ahead of the grand finals. And game one had a nice scenario that really did come into play later again, because it was a Beedrill lead into a Seeking. And you would think that that is
Mhm.
really good for the Seeking. And Hikami was on the Seeking in that matchup, called a Fellstinger successfully. So that's like the low damage move. Pato had
Yep.
to shield the Icy Wind. But what a Beedrill can do in that Seeking matchup, and Pato appeared to be very aware of it, whereas Hikami was hopeful to reach a second Icy Wind, but he did not. The Bug Bites, the Shadow Bug Bites, are actually so powerful that you are able to take out a Seeking even if you land as little as a Fellstinger. So that ended up being really, really important for Pato, getting the one shield farm down and exiting with almost another move, not having to shield up a secondary Icy Wind. That is just matchup knowledge that really comes in clutch in such tense situations.
It's fascinating
Um,
too because that gameplay echoed in the grand finals. Just to jump ahead briefly here,
yeah.
we actually saw kind of an inverse situation where Colin was facing off against Pato in grands. This was game 3 of the reset. Colin did the exact same thing because Pato led Spiritomb into Beedrill, he instant swapped Seeking. Colin connected Fellstinger and Bug Bit all the way through. So when I was watching back the grand finals to track teams, I was like, my God, that is like insane to know that if you connect the Fellstinger, you can just chew through the rest of the Sea King. But that's wild that both Hikami and Colin and Pato, I guess, knew that matchup.
Yeah, and like it's so nice for the Beedrill user because you come out with such useful energy, you will still be
Yeah.
at your original attack thanks to the Felstinger, and an Exeter just like takes out half of every Pokemon essentially. So even the shield that you invest is not really going to matter as much in the long run, just because you will get it back or you will get a huge chunk of damage with the energy. But not only
Correct.
did that echo, but we also had situations. Let me see whether I can find the exact game where that happened. I think it happened twice actually in the grand finals.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, even in the very first game, where Pato is the Seeking in the Seeking versus Shadow Beedrill matchup, calls the
Mm.
Felstinger, but instead of committing to another Icy Wind, knowing the matchup, he pivots out into his own Beedrill, which then has the health advantage. And that essentially forces Colin's hand because, oh, now he's just doing resisted bug bite damage and it's not actually as cozy as he'd like it to be. And that happens again in the bracket reset in game two. So that is how you could also play that matchup if you just are willing to call that Felstinger bait and then bring in a Pokemon that essentially forces your opponent to switch up their play and make it a little more dynamic and prevent the Beedrill from fully farming down the Seeking.
Correct. So, in preparation for this tournament, I definitely spent a lot of time looking at PV Poke, a lot of just even shields, even energy matchups. And I think for the next international or just basically the next limited meta that I commentate, I do want to spend more time actually doing the matchups and probably less time on the simulations because that was a big reason I felt like I missed the Milotic call because in the Sims the Milotic is like 18 and 18. It's not going to hard win a bunch of matchups. It's not going to hard lose a bunch of matchups. But when it comes down to the actual gameplay, like you're talking about, knowing these nuances of being able to switch in with the health advantage and bug bite all the way through, or knowing you can win the Sea King matchup after connecting the Fell Stinger. These things are very nuanced and they don't show up in the simulations very much. So, yeah, I'm not sure if you had any more notes on losers or grand or sorry losers finals before we move to grand
Exactly.
finals.
So my last note on losers finals, game two was just like a bunch of catches from Pato's side. Game three we actually have, I think it was a mirror lead from B to B.
Mhm.
And both let the Exeter go, I believe. But then Pato is the one to first decisively pivot out into the Seeking. And I think that is like such a small thing, but such an important thing when it comes to the actual top performers. I think, especially with the changes to the switch timer, and especially in a meta like this where a lot of picks are very neutral into each other, being proactive matters so much. You do not want to concede farm downs, you do want to get ahead on energy. You do want to be the one that pivots out early, just because the momentum gained, even like a Pokemon saved for a catch, or even to clear a debuff from the Icy Winds, from the Rock Tombs, from the Wraps that we have in this meta. It can go such a long way to just save this Pokemon to be the one to pivot out early. And part of just being a little faster on that swap out was essentially what won him the game. And while it was a very tiny moment, I do believe it's representative of a greater trend that makes champions.
We need to find a way to help you become a full-time Pokemon Go trainer and make enough money to where you don't have to work a day job. Because when I saw this meta and I saw how important the switch timer was, I personally thought that this was like tailor-made for a trainer like you, just based on your switch timer manipulation in tournaments past. So that aside, I agree with you. I think that finding ways to kind of maneuver around your opponent in this meta was incredibly important, and we saw this a lot in the commentary. You would see somebody switch a Pokemon out, but then they were in a position where they would get debuffed once or twice, and they'd be stuck in that matchup, and they'd be at a massive disadvantage. So, kind of knowing when to push and when to pull in this meta was very important. And I think a lot of these trainers, especially the high performers, right, practice this in scrims and knew exactly how to minimize mistakes, which is not always obvious in this kind of format. So, if you're ready, we can move on to grand finals, which was Colin taking on Pato Man. And to just preface this briefly, right? I looked back at Pato Man's run. We keep on talking about winners round 3 being where he dropped. Put it in perspective though, winners round 1, he actually had a bye. His opponent did not show up. Winners round 2, he took on Jean Carnero 01, which is a trainer I'm not very familiar with. Round 3, he lost 2-0 to Damon Cash. After falling to Damon Cash, he beat JoJo Go-Go Dancer, which is still probably the most fun name in all of our competitive Pokemon Go community. Then he took on EBQERPL 120. Then he took on a trainer whose name I'm definitely going to butcher, Fiantiga Fian, something like that. Forgive my pronunciation. Then he beat Withered. Then he beat Allen. And then going into day number 2, he beat Kellio. He beat Blissfully. He beat Chris LB. He beat Paula. He beat Sustenance Eater. He beat Rise to Occasion. He beat Steinar. And then on Sunday was the 3-0 versus Hikami, and then the matchup versus Colin. So honestly, you mentioned before, and I was laughing. I was laughing to myself when I made the realization. You made the point before that Sustenance Eater won, or excuse me, no, Beelzeboy won 21 games, and that was the second most games won on the day. And I was like, huh, I wonder who's first. Well, I guess it's probably Potaman because he's from the loser side. But guess what, everybody? You compare Beelzeboy's 21 games, Potaman won 35 games in order to get to where he was and win the entire tournament. 35! That's like playing a whole extra tournament on top of what Beelzeboy did.
This may be like more wins than I have done this season. And I played in like 4 events.
Well,
I guess it's close.
I bumped into Doombug briefly after the event, and he was a little salty. And Doombug knows I love him, right? So I can say this. Doombug said, I'm upset that Potaman broke my record for the most
Oh
games
yeah,
won in a tournament.
Was it Arlington or was it San Antonio? It was one of the two, right? Arlington? I don't know.
That's a
Like
really good
he had like
question.
a incredible losers run once.
Yeah, it was one of the Texas tournaments. I'm gonna try to look it up in the
Yeah.
background while we discuss. But yeah, Doombug was like, "Well, I hope the commentators said that, but I'm still, not thrilled about it that he was able to do that." So
Okay,
I
so I looked
understand.
at my performance this season, and 35 game wins is my Pittsburgh run, my Gdansk run, and my EUIC run combined. So it's
Wow.
it do be like that.
So it was San Antonio. That was
Okay.
his insane run. 32 games won after falling to Mango in round 1. So 32 versus 35. That's one set of difference, but still to do it at an IC at this level is insane.
Yeah,
So
it's wild.
now that we kind of set the table, I guess we can go into grants here. So, and I said this on the commentary too. I said you wanted the best. That's what you got. You got the final boss, Colin 6, taking on Potaman. And this was such a fascinating storyline because Potaman, last year came for the winner side bracket reset. He was able to right the ship and win. This time it felt so much different coming from the loser side bracket, and it's a real test on whether or not a trainer will rest on their laurels or if they will continue to push themselves and persevere even when things seem really dark. And they did a couple of times. I think Colin was up. He was one game away in the grand finals from winning, and then he was one game away in the grand finals reset from winning it all, if my memory serves. So it was actually very, very close this whole time.
Let me check. Okay, so I
Oh
think
no,
the
excuse
original
me.
grand finals, yeah, they were
Yeah,
like a 3-1 for Pato. So Colin
you're
never got the
correct.
second win, so it was never like one away. But like
Yeah.
obviously the so the game 4 of the reset was probably the
Ooh.
most exciting one. Because so there were like multiple situations that were like super close, super dynamic. There was a Licky on Colin's side that lived on 1 HP, but in the end game, it all came down to a Dunsparce versus Dunsparce situation. And
Yeah.
both of them were just about in range of a drill run. So first, everybody was like holding their breath. Who's going to win CMP? So whose charge attack was going to fire first?
I
And
literally
it
said
ended up
that.
like it ended up like both survived the drill run, but then they did one more rollout, and Collins Dunsparce fainted. Patos Dunsparce hold on by like 1 HP, 2 HP, certainly not more than that. And yeah, I was like, you could probably like have an idea of maybe what would happen, but it was still like very, very tiny margins after the game itself was already just like so back and forth. And yeah, it could have all ended there for Pato if his stance bars was just a little less tanky, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, pulled through and really like made it work.
Yeah, I said it during the cast when the first draw run got queued up from Potsaman. I said, I don't know if this is enough. Everyone hold your breath. And I felt like I felt like the collective arena did quiet for just a moment, and then the drill run connected wasn't enough, back and forth. But to zoom out a bit more, I'll give like a quick play by play because I agree. I think this was probably the most hyped game that we've had in a grand finals in a long time. So we start off the matchup. It was Collins Licky Licky versus Potaman's Dunsparce. Pato absorbs an earthquake, then he swaps into his Spear Tomb. Colin goes Drapion. So already Colin is up 2-1 in the series. He aligns Drapion versus Spiritomb. I personally think it's over. I'm like, all right. I think Colin's going to double crunch. This is going to be all she wrote, so to speak. Colin actually double shields his Drapion, and I think that this was just Potaman applying pressure, getting off the rock tombs. And then Potaman lets his other two Pokemon go, and his final Pokemon is Dunsparce, right? Potaman brings out the Dunsparce. Uh, Colin sends out Drapion. It's a charge attack priority tie because he banked a crunch. So already, the last shield for Potaman's Dunsparce is gone. He spends it on the crunch. Luckily, no debuff. If a debuff procs there, that whole game is over, right?
True.
Uh, he's able to connect the drill run. And then it goes into the Dunsparce mirror match, which you highlighted. And I actually clipped this moment and posted it on X. I was like, yeah, this is the moment I want to share. This is like the peak moment. And what a fun cast. I remember just like screaming my lungs out. I was like back and forth, blow by blow, and saying it's not over. We're going to game five. And what an insane
Yeah.
moment. And you can see
I
Pato
was
when the he just put his fingers up. He's like crossing his fingers
yeah,
like
true.
I hope this doesn't knock out.
So I was sitting in the front row and the crowd was feeling it. Like there was like such such an atmosphere, like everybody falling silent and then oh survived. But now what happens? And then obviously all the Pato chants from the friends, the family, the Spanish community.
Mm,
That was
yeah.
a very hype moment and really what you want to see on a championship Sunday because like it's just such a good case being made for our game being exciting and fun and something that everybody should try. And you love to see it.
Yeah. I
Um,
I almost I don't think I've mentioned this to you, but I almost wish that there was like a horizontal bar at the bottom of the screen that was actually tracking the turns so that people could see when fast moves were thrown, when catches were made, when charge attacks were thrown, and you can actually visualize how close these games actually are. Because I think a lot of casual viewers they look at it, they don't realize that rollout is a three-turn move. They don't realize it takes a half second to switch. They don't realize these minor things. So like the skill expression is kind of lost on some people, especially if you are used to slower, more turn-based games like TCG or VGC. So I don't know. Maybe I'll make a video as like a proof of concept just to have that shown. But it's been on my mind for quite a while. But yeah, the margins were insane. I agree with you. I think I was looking back at the YouTube stream and people who love the other games were commenting, being like, "That was crazy. This is actually really hype. This is really fun." And I share the sentiment. Right?
yeah, that's what we want to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we can try and highlight some of what went on in the other games of the grand finals. I'll try and walk us through a little bit, just through highlights of what happened. So before the reset, when Colin still was allowed to lose one set, um, very first game was the example I gave where Pato caught the Felstinger on the Seeking, then pivoted into his own B and essentially saved the Seeking for the end game, where it actually came in clutch because it did farm down Colin's Dunsparce for the win.
Mhm.
Um, Second game, Colin trying to make some plays with B energy, but Pato is just playing the debuff game so well. I feel as if he had so many Pokemon with that debuff utility on his team. Icy Wind from Seeking, Rep from Milotic, and in the end game it was like a weakened Dunsparce against a healthy Milotic, and that's just never fun if you're the Dunsparce.
Mhm.
Game 3, Colin pulls one back, making a very hype catch on a 1 HP Drapion.
Yes.
So sometimes it does pay if you just pivot out aggressively out of a low health Pokemon because with the switch timer, it may just make the difference between win or loss.
What shocked me.
And
Sorry, it's easy.
mhm.
I just want to jump
No,
in just for a
yeah, no,
second.
yes, please do.
What shocked me about that play right there that you mentioned is that Pato actually threw on alignment. I believe he threw six sucker punches and then the rock tomb on alignment, and Collins sniffed out the alignment throw, which was insane at that level to make the catch on the Drapion. Oh, but I remember thinking that's such like odd timing, such a weird. That's just game sense, right? Just having a feel for what your
Yeah.
opponent's trying to do. And Pato was like, "Oh, the last thing he'll expect is for me to throw an alignment," and then he does. So it's like really crazy. But yeah, I digress.
This reminds me of the Pittsburgh Grand Finals against Steiner, where I also made a catch on my Corviknight, but not when he had the move, but when he would have CMP tied me because he had the information that he was winning CMP from the game before in the Credilli
Yes,
mirror. So like sometimes like very non-obvious moments can make the most sense if you have the right idea of how your opponent plays. And Colin definitely
correct.
like just he would certainly like throw at a moment when I don't expect it and I wouldn't expect it on alignment, so I will catch on alignment. Smart.
Exactly. Smart.
Um, game four, the final game of the first set of the grand finals. A lot of catching, like a lot of catching and sneaking as well. I feel like we had a lot of catch and sneaks, which is when you not only catch a move but also get a full fast attack through. This is a very commonplace now. It depends on how you time your catch, because depending on whether you catch on alignment or one turn before, you will be able to either get a fast attack through or not.
Mm,
But this again did highlight a problem with like Colin can play really well, but if the catch that you make is on a debuffing move, Pato will just gain so much momentum from the matchup that you are now stuck in that
correct.
even though the catch in a vacuum is good, it will still spiral out of control. So that's how Pato essentially took the first series, where like even if Colin tried to get fancy, there was always this extra level of insurance where okay, like you caught that, it's an icy wind, it's a rock tomb, it doesn't help you much.
And I just want to emphasize your point. You absolutely nailed it. I actually listed the catches and what actually occurred, right? The attempt versus the reality. So the first catch, Colin tried to catch a shadow ball onto his Dunsparce from Potaman's Spear Tomb, but Potaman threw the Rock Tomb instead. So just to your point, you try to switch and make a clever play, and you just get debuffed and then bogged down. Colin tries to catch again a few moments later. He tries to catch Aquatail from Milotic onto Kingdra, but Pato holds his energy, goes up two more Dragon Tails, and throws the wrap. So it's like, damn, I try to switch and I just get stuck and debuff anyway. And then the third time Colin caught, he actually swapped in his Dunsparce, but it was on charge attack priority with Sea King's Megahorn. So he was able to kind of catch, but he also gave up all the energy on his Dunsparce and he lost the Pokemon too. But then in the end, Potsman had the Shadow Ball to win the Spear to Mirror. So yeah, three catch attempts. One was a knockout where he lost a bunch of energy. The other two, he tried to catch resisted, or double resisted actually, and ended up getting debuffed and switch locked. So it's like, damn, Bottoman, like you said, he just built a moat around himself for that game
Yeah,
four.
it's a tough time having to go up against that.
Yeah,
But yeah, like Colin did manage to adapt quite well in the grand finals reset, which did come down to the decisive game five. Um, I think I thought the game one was quite interesting because Pato essentially just played the zero shields with Beedrill into Kingdra, and won that zero shield scenario because
he did.
honestly, even though you think, oh, this is like a bug bite Felstinger user, I want to spend all my shields on that Pokemon so I can ramp up and do a lot of damage. But the zeros with B are surprisingly solid because it's typically bulky enough, just bulky enough to survive one small move if it's neutral, like a Kingdra Swift. And the Exegor, as we've established, is pretty much a delete button from half health or lower. Um, so that was pretty like interesting how that played out. At the end of the day, it still worked out in Colin's favor though, because he managed his energy so well that he stored a charge attack on his Spirit Tomb that he could then later use to essentially snipe the energy from Patoman's Tomb,
Correct.
where Pato was like one or two fast attacks away from reaching a charge attack of his own. But all of that got deleted, and that put Colin in the driver's seat again.
Yeah, the Shadow
Um,
Ball snipe was huge for sure.
yeah, was the game-winning play. Game two is something that we've seen time and time again in like on this day three, where Pato is calling a Felstinger bait from Colin's B on the Seeking, and rewatching it, I was like thinking, hmm, this would look really fun if he just exited and the seeking was gone. But I guess like it's the low risk play, and we will come back to this later. But sometimes risk taking is more necessary than we might think. And again, the pivot into his own B drill, and then something interesting happens because Colin counter swaps his Licky Licky, which you would imagine is a really good answer to Beedrill. But Pato's Beedrill is actually ahead on energy and also just bulky enough to barely hang on to one body slam and the rollouts and make two Exorcists, which actually lets it win the one shield scenario. And this essentially makes it so that after Colin already shielded an Icy Wind from Seeking in the lead matchup, this matchup ends up being like, okay, costing Colin his second shield and
Yeah.
therefore leaving him defenseless in the end game.
Mhm.
So we're back to 1-1. Game 3, this is where Colin goes up 2-1. Um, and I think this is one of the rare Pato misplays in these grand finals because he has a lot of energy on his Spiritomb when Colin brings in the dance bars. But this time he doesn't build the moat around him. He doesn't go for the debuff. Instead, he swaps out with almost two Rock Tombs loaded. And the dance bars can then just wear down Pato's Milotic by
Yeah.
throwing full strength drill runs at it. And yeah, this doesn't work out too well for Pato, and Colin is one game away from winning it all. Which
That's my
does.
my sorry, ZZ, go ahead.
No, 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 you go ahead.
I just want to jump in for a moment. That's actually my notes almost verbatim. I wrote here rare misplay by Pato, but the follow up was different. I said he shielded body slam on Spiritomb. So he also not only banked the energy on Spiritomb, bailed it out, but he also kind of got a little lost in the sauce and shielded a double resisted body slam, which
Okay,
he easily would have
so
survived.
I will say that I don't believe he got lost in the sauce. This was a catch, but Colin did have the earthquake energy. I think Pato's thinking in the moment was, oh, Colin is such a high level player. He could have feasibly thrown the earthquake anticipating the catch, and if I let that
Ah,
go, that would be really rough for me. So he does protect shield for the potential earthquake, but he actually
yeah.
had executed the body slam catch and just didn't really trust himself there, or just gave Colin a lot of credit, which, to be fair, Colin deserves given his reputation and his
Yes.
record. Like, he's backing up that reputation. But yeah, there would have been a win condition if Pato, like, maybe would have been a win condition if Pato anticipated that.
Fair.
But yeah, then we move on to the crazy Dunsparce endgame that we already talked about. And finally, this is again where the risk taking comes into play. In game 5, which is one of the more one sided games of the series, Pato
Mhm.
gets both of Colin's shields by baiting Icy Winds, successfully baiting the Mega Horn, throwing Icy Winds
Yeah.
onto the Shadow Drapion. I think calling that could actually flip this series. Would have probably been a very close game still, but would have Colin into a much more playable position at least. But this is something that I have noticed throughout the entire back and forth between Colin and Pato, where Pato is much more willing to make those gutsy calls than Colin. I think there was like one instance where there's Colin's Kingdra with more than an outrage loaded, swifting a two shield Milotic that just lets it go because this is an obvious swift, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you really have to you have to risk it all to win it all, and Pato was just more willing to do that.
Yeah, that's very very similar to what I have in my notes. Pato shields initial crunch, baits icy wind. Colin shields it. Colin catches Megahorn on Dunsparce, so even though he gets out of the debuff situation, he takes an enormous amount of damage on the Dunsparce, and that's when I kind of personally felt the momentum start to really slide in one direction. I felt like Pato Man was just building himself up. Seeking connects another Megahorn to Colin's Spiritomb, and then this is when Pato swaps in his Spiritomb and he realizes that he's about to win EUIC the second year in a row. And he just looks out at the crowd, looks back at his phone. He's like, got to finish the job, but I think I've got this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was very hype. I will say that even though I do feel for Colin for coming so close and barely not pulling it off, being in that same position the year before. Um, to me, winning my first trophy felt still like such an accomplishment, and I do hope that the same goes for Colin this year because like he earned it after so many years of consistent top performance. And yeah, as a EUIC runner-up, I will say that one can be very proud of a performance like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think our host Fareed had a chance to bump into Colin after day one, or sorry, excuse me, day two, going into day three, and he said that Colin's obviously won events before. He's top cut numerous times. He said he's never seen Colin as happy as he was when Colin realized that he had locked in a trophy at the European Internationals. So I definitely think that he was riding high. I don't know how he's feeling now. He's a very stoic person. Colin doesn't give you much emotionally when you talk to him. So I know he's got a really strong support system, and I'm sure a lot of people are proud of him. And I agree with your sentiment. I hope he's proud of himself because honestly, when you look at somebody like Pato Man, I said it during the cast, he's like the unstoppable force. I don't know if anyone in the world right now, actually, I'll say it, nobody in the world right now can argue with that level of
Yeah.
high level consistency, right?
And I will say that one thing that I really liked about day three was also the interviews ahead of the grand finals. This time we actually had time for that. I feel like last year we were running so late with Unite taking longer than it should have that we skipped over that entirely. But
Uh-huh.
both players and their loved ones got to talk a little bit. And between Pato and Colin, there was just like a lot of acknowledgement of each other's greatness, and
Yeah.
I do always enjoy when competitors treat each other like that, even though there's so much on the line.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. What an event. I know Hikami didn't have the showing that he wanted to on Sunday. It was definitely a very rough couple of rounds for him, but also making it to third place is really impressive for our French trainer. And yeah, I mean, Colin is due for his own IC crown very soon. Potaman, I don't know who can stop him. I don't know what else there is really to say in terms of
Yeah.
those players. I just can't wait to see Potaman at Worlds.
Oh yeah, oh Jesus. But yeah, another word towards Hikami because this was his like his two best performances of all time. Both came from this season with a little victory and his first trophy as well. So I think he has like such a strong season and certainly a lot to be proud of as well. And I can't
Yeah.
wait to see what Hikami does next because I do believe that there's also like some team building creativity there that I like to see a lot, especially in the Open Great League metas. And
Mhm.
yeah, we are very close to a shift of said Open Great League meta. I feel like we are probably days away from the
Yeah.
reveal of the upcoming Pokemon Go Battle League season with all the changes that will entail. I don't know. This this may already spiral us into the next point that we may want to discuss, unless you have more
Yes.
things to add to our UIC coverage.
No, no, no. I think this is a great segue into the final topic for us to discuss. The honestly, ZZ, the internet's in flames about this, and I've seen it on the Silver Arena Reddit
I've been
page,
stoking those flames. Like
and
I'm like kind of guilty.
I see you just shooting kerosene on this whole thing, and honestly, in the competitive community, it just sounds like the end of days. But let's go ahead and talk about this just briefly as we wrap up. This new battle system, at least right now, on the day of recording, February 22nd, it looks like an unmitigated disaster. What is going on with this rewrite?
It's like it does feel like a better version of something that they intended to roll out like 3 months from now. But I know that they've been working on this for quite some time. So, like, one thing, okay, let's start with the positives. I
Okay.
really love the communication that went alongside with this update because it all
Okay.
started with a blog post that announced that we would be strengthening the foundations of Pokemon Go trainer battles, which does sound
Mm.
very promising, doesn't it? Um, well, set foundations do look a little janky as of now, but the overall idea of just communicating, oh, in these game situations, this is the intended behavior, and we are now enabling and gradually rolling out a new PvP infrastructure, like an entirely new system, not just a fix to the old one, but a
Yeah.
refactor of the code, that will make it so that these intended behaviors consistently apply, and you will have like security and like, oh, like if this happens to me, this is maybe even worth a dispute at a regional, and I can really stand
Yeah.
up for myself if this doesn't happen. But I also may have to do that less because the game is going to function better in the future. There's like so many positives about what is being promised, and also the fact that Ben Lee, who is like part of the leadership when it comes to the battle systems at Niantic slash Scopely slash Pokemon Go, like I have gotten to talk to Ben briefly at Anaheim Worlds. Now he gave
Mhm.
our previous world champion Itzaxon a lengthy interview on the refactor. And I
Correct.
will say that I do have a lot of trust in his ability and also a lot of respect for the openness with which he communicates. So that was like a lot of interesting insight that you guys can watch on the It's Accent YouTube channel if you're interested in some more background info. So like
Yeah.
all the communication, all the intent behind it, I really liked, and I technically believe they can make it work. However, they have rolled it out, and it does not work. So it's like a
Yeah.
very limited rollout thus far. I feel as if like some regions in LATAM do have it as of now. There's like rumors about Asian players having access to it, but that's
Mhm.
also not like too widespread. Um, but what changes is essentially so like the intended change, let's get that out of the way, is
Okay.
that um, right now, if say you are an Empoleon, you do two metal sounds, which takes 4 turns. Your opponent is a Talonflame, doing one incinerate, taking 5 turns. As of now, on the old system, the damage from that incinerate would apply before you are able to click your Hydro Cannon and potentially get a charge attack off. If it
Correct.
happens differently, if you do get your Hydro Cannon off, we would call that the damage registration error. But now that inconsistency is supposed to be the rule. It's no longer going to be an error. The Empoleon should always get to get this move off, which will change how PvPoke sims work. It will change how um, like fast move timing works to a
Yeah.
large degree. It's like going to be like minor changes to how mechanics play out, but it's going to be like a relearning of things just because we have enabled like a little something that will have different implications. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of minute details, but it's essentially the gist of it that we want to have that inconsistency fixed and therefore have an entirely new system. The
I'm going to
problem is,
coin. Oh, sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead, TZ.
you can jump in. Like the problem is that even if that would be working right now, the new system, like the camera pans all over the place. It feels more laggy than before, if anything. And overall, it even in a game where the biggest bugs don't appear, it just feels a lot less smooth and less presentable than previously.
Yeah.
And people have opinions on whether that is a worthwhile trade-off or not.
So I'm going to coin this acronym here, right? So everyone can say they heard it on the Show 6 podcast before they heard it anywhere else. Everybody's familiar with DRE, as you mentioned. Uh, the way I think of this update primarily is that it's changing the DRO, the damage registration order. So in this new system, the charge attacks, as you pointed out, will take priority over the fast attacks. So you give the example of Empoleon versus Talonflame. Another example that's also very relatable, we saw this actually at EUIC, is like one turn moves versus charge attacks when you have 1 HP on the Pokemon with the charge attack. So typically, if you saw like a Kingdra come in and there was like a 1 HP Umbreon with a Dark Pulse, and the Kingdra fires the Dragon Breath, the Umbreon would never get its charge attack off because the fast attack would take priority. But with this change to DRO, we actually have the Dark Pulse getting priority over the fast attack, right? So that's definitely going to change things. I had one friend DM me and say that Incinerate is officially dead because it won't be as useful anymore now that everybody can get off their charge stacks in the 11th hour, so to speak. Um, but to go back to your point about the interview, it was very insightful, and I actually really enjoyed listening to it. A couple of takeaways that I had was that basically all of the combat system mechanics, whether it's rockets, gyms, raids, PvP, team leader battles, max battles, etc., anything combat oriented is actually moving into its own cluster of servers. So people have talked about like Pokemon Go 2 or Pokemon Go PvP being a separate application. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, this is about as close as we're going to get. And Ben actually pointed out in his interview that our suspicions, our tinfoil conspiracy thoughts from years past, were actually correct in the sense that large in-game events can have an impact, can have a ripple effect on the battle system. So if you have like GoFest going on, or if there's like a major, for example, this weekend Go Tour in LA, and you experience additional hiccups and problems in GBL, they are somewhat related, which I thought was like huge validation because people have been saying that, like, oh, why is PvP so laggy on Community Day? Well, that proves it. And then when you juxtapose that against all the battle mechanics going to their own server cluster, it kind of gives you that sense of relief that oh, things might actually change here, which is really good. So yeah, I'm just reading over your post here. You shared the video from Shaner PvP, and the first sentence of your post: if Scopely aren't able to fix this before the first stream regional of the new season, there may not be a return from this moment. It's so ominous, right? It's so heavy. And if you look at the footage, it's hard not to agree. I mean, this looks like hot trash, right? This looks
This is
awful.
like, I will say this is meant as conditional as it is phrased. Like if they
Yeah.
fix it within those 3 weeks, this can be a net improvement very easily. But
Yeah.
I don't have the insight in how easy this is to fix, given that the rollout started at a moment when it was obviously not really ready for like at least
Yeah.
a stream tournament where everybody
So,
want to see our product, and if our product looks like this, nobody will pick it
yeah.
up.
I agree. I agree. I think your sentiment is correct. A couple things I will say, just with an air of vagueness, is that it's important to keep in mind that, like you pointed out, we have some trainers in Latam with the new system, some trainers in Asia are rolling out the new system. The way that Niantic has traditionally rolled out updates is by region and then by device. So you're going to see Apple devices in Latam be updated before you see Android devices in Europe, for example, just to spitball some, an example there. So what you're basically having is you're having some players on the new system battle players on the old system. So there's going to be growing pains there. There's going to be a lot of disconnect, a lot of incongruency, and the most important point, right? If you don't take that as a sufficient answer, the most important point that I will say is that the full rollout is not yet complete. Now, you can argue, should they have rolled out piecemeal and scared everybody half to death? No, I don't think that was a good idea. But I will say that in order to have a fully formed opinion, personally, looking at the calendar here, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait another 7 to 10 days until the full rollout is complete through the month of February, and we are all on the same system going into March. And then I'll start to form my opinions personally.
I think that is a reasonable approach. Um, the current clips that we see circulating do not inspire confidence, but I also know that it is not the same like just testing something in a closed setting with like individual devices compared
Mhm.
to testing something that is live globally or even largely across one region. So
Yeah.
I can see how like having having the new system be live somewhere and fail may be what they need to actually iron out the kinks that are currently existing. And I will not, like, I haven't lost hope. I'm just like rolling my eyes because can anything ever go smoothly? We really would appreciate good news and like really there was such an optimism around the blog post because hey,
Yeah.
that's us. They haven't talked to us like that since the last dev diary. Um, and it was like a little bit really nipped in the bud after we saw what it currently looks like.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe like 7 to 10 days is enough of a time frame to fix things. I will certainly not jump to conclusions. I'm merely commenting on the status quo as it presents itself.
Well, and to be fair, I think that when we actually have our full rollout, I will make an effort to collect clips, footage, examples of bugs, and I will expedite sending those over to the team that's working on the game. So obviously, I can't change anything myself, but I will offer when the time comes to be a more direct channel in order to getting these things ironed out because obviously we both have an enormous interest in this game succeeding and like you pointed out in this current state it would be an unmitigated disaster, so hopefully that's not the case. Fingers crossed they can actually fix it, and yeah, I wish things were more smooth, but when you're rolling out to I guess millions of devices based on region, based on cell carrier, based on operating system, it's not easy, at least not for Niantic. One funny anecdote, I almost forgot. One funny anecdote I want to offer is that apparently Pokemon Unite is even more down bad than Pokemon Go is right now with all the updates that their devs are doing. And they're making all kinds of questionable decisions. I heard a lot about it at EUIC. But there was a Pokemon Unite player who referenced Ben's interview with Axon and said, "My gosh, I wish Unite had better communication like Pokemon Go does." My friend, you have been led astray. This
My
is
sweet
this
summer
is
child.
you sweet summer
Oh
child, you
God.
have no
Yeah.
idea what you are invoking here. We've been a game for 10 years. We probably had 3 community interviews in 10 years, if not maybe 4. So, yeah, Unite, do not look at us as an example of communication and transparency because that is not the case.
I will say that like this could still be the start of something great if Niantic
Sure.
slash Scopely take in the feedback and see that okay, like the style of communication, even if the end product isn't quite it just yet, maybe that will change. But like the style of communication, everybody is like unanimously on board with really celebrating and cherishing and yeah, more of that, please. And maybe they can adopt something like that again. I don't know whether they have the manpower for that or the willingness or even enough projects in store. But one aspect of Ben's interview that really resonated with me was supposedly coding Aegislash for the new version of PvP took just
Uh,
about half the amount of time that it took to code Aegislash for the old version. So apparently it will
Ooh.
be a lot more efficient to introduce new complex features onto the new system. And that would open up the door for Pokemon like Mimikyu to come into Pokemon Go, for maybe broader changes that can maybe allow for more individual modification of how the game interacts. Like I don't know whether we'll have
Mhm.
held items ever or anything like that. Um, but apparently more things will be possible. Let's just see how they look.
I hope so. Fingers crossed. I'm going to hold my breath the whole time. I don't want our game to die, especially not on the 10-year anniversary, please. But only time will tell. A lot of this is out of our hands. But ZZ, it's been a great episode. I have a local tournament I'm going to drive down to here in a few minutes, and hopefully I don't get wiped. So please send me a team once we finish our recording here. And it's been fun per usual. I don't know if you have any closing thoughts.
Closing thoughts are that people should keep their eyes peeled because not only have we like we will have to get through a backlog of OGL regionals
Hmm,
that aren't discussed yet. There's going to be the Seattle event coming up, which
sure.
a certain Mr. Chief may be playing in potentially.
Maybe.
Um, there's going to be a move update very soon, and there's going to be Pokemon Day on the 27th. And people are rumoring that the 10th generation of Pokemon may be at least hinted at, if not even like a starter reveal or something like that. So, this is going to be a very exciting week, and we'll do our best to get together as often and as soon as possible to bring you the news a little more quickly than in previous weeks and months.
Yeah.
I had been pretty busy with my day job, but I know that my schedule will be a little lighter over the next couple of months. So hoping to be able to make more NA friendly availability so we can get together and record.
I've gotten some heartfelt DMs. I had a few conversations at EUIC. I think that people really do enjoy the show, and they want more of it, and they're wondering when we're going to create more. So we're on it, everybody. Don't worry. And ZZ is a saint for putting up with me not getting the YouTube versions out. Still going to get that done as soon as I can. I'm just
I
yeah, I'm
should
just
push you more towards it. Like somebody has to do it.
yeah, I'm just a prodigal procrastinator, I guess you could say, right?
Very
But
much so.
we'll get it done, everybody. I appreciate you all so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode, our EUIC recap. We'll be back very soon, as EC pointed out, with an Open Great League recap and maybe a potential guest interview, plus Pokemon Day, plus a Seattle recap. There's a lot of content coming, so make sure to subscribe and leave a review, and we'll see you all very soon. Bye bye.